Hey everyone, welcome back to the Searchcast. With me, we got an exciting episode. One of my favorite SEOs to talk to, Brian Gorman, who is a world expert in SEO. He's published on Moz. Brian, you want to say hello?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Great to be here.
Awesome. So, Brian, the whole point of what the Searchcast is trying to help, people that are either early in the SEO careers or potentially looking to get into SEO. We want to make these episodes about them. How do they get that leg in? Can you tell us a little bit, like how long have you been in the industry? How did you get your start?
Sure. Yeah. Around 2013, I entered the world of digital marketing. I was a freelance musician after being a teacher for 6 years. So I was like we were talking about earlier. I was kind of like in open waters in a career sense. And my buddy had found this job at a digital marketing agency on Craigslist, and he basically asked me one day, "Hey man, do you want like health insurance, air conditioning, and like to work at a computer all day?" And I'm like, that actually sounds incredible at this point. So that's basically how I got my start. I started as a Google penalty removal specialist. So I hunted down all of the spammy backlinks in a profile. It was pure outreach back then, and we would ask the webmaster to remove it. Sometimes they would do it, sometimes we'd get ignored, and sometimes they would charge an exorbitant fee. Uh, I did that for a couple of years. I moved to another agency. I did technical SEO and focused on e-commerce sites. And then I moved to my third agency where I really like ran the gamut. I was an analyst, a manager, a director, ultimately a VP. I led a team. I kind of led strategy and got some documentation and processes in place, that kind of thing. Just kind of helped grow things. But yeah, that's kind of like my entire trajectory, and I just kind of fell into it like a lot of SEOs do.
Yeah, so you're a man of many hats. You're wearing a hat today, but teacher, musician. What kind of music did you play, or do you play? Do you still play?
I still play, yeah. I actually have a music degree. That
Oh
was
wow,
like an early that was an early miss in terms of smart decisions. I probably should have studied, marketing or something like that. But yeah, I was passionate about music. I got my degree. I do everything from like classical, rock, blues. I've been in all kinds of bands. I've done jazz. I've done church music. I've done it all. You kind of have to when you're a freelance musician. You have to be versatile. And I mean, SEO can be the same way, honestly. Specialty is good, but it's also good to know a little bit about everything. But yeah,
I was gonna say, yeah, I think there's some parallel paths there, right? You have to be kind of fluid in nature to succeed. What did you teach
yeah.
when you were a teacher?
I taught music. Yeah,
Okay.
it was another thing. I just sort of lucked into this job at a private school. Yeah, they handed me a contract, and as a musician, I had never seen one of those before. Like I'm actually going to get a salary and benefits. Yeah, and I taught for 6 years. It was awesome, and I definitely applied that in my SEO career once I got to a level where it was time to train people and build a team.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely not a musician, but I think musical theory is something that's super interesting, and there's like almost a science behind it, just like kind of the parallel path to SEO. There's kind of a science behind it, but it's going to work a little different for everyone, and the things that you apply can have different outcomes, whether how big or how minute they are. You just never quite know.
I,
So yeah,
I, I'm actually sorry to interrupt you, Shane. I'm actually so glad you mentioned that. I had that thought this week. I've been thinking a lot about, SEO and how learning it is so exciting. And I think maybe a lot, at least like a healthy portion of the population that become SEOs are non-technical to start, but it's a good way to like dip your toe into some technical work. And it's like so exciting and empowering, but it also has the allure of like pulling you into that, and you get kind of sucked into just like you get so tactical and you kind of gamify the whole thing, and you lose the freedom of like creation and who this all is for. It's for an audience, and it's to generate revenue, to grow something, like those things kind of get lost. And music theory is actually the same way. It's a way to define music, and it's highly technical. But you can get so pulled into it that the music you write with all that theory knowledge is boring and no one wants to listen to it. And I know that SEO can be the same way. You're so tactical and you've gamified it to the point where your content stinks and nobody wants to read it or link to it. And I think you can't lose that creative spirit in either music or SEO, to be honest.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if talking to another musician, you show them the notes and they're like, "This is beautiful, right? Like this is great. How'd you think of this?" And then you show it to a mass audience, like, "I don't understand. This doesn't sound like
That's
anything I would
exactly
ever
it.
listen to," right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's such a good thing, right? I think something that's super important to know is if you get your first SEO job, or whether it's in-house or whether it's client, it's all about your stakeholders, who you're reporting to. That's the most important thing in driving value and impact. So, I'll give a tip, right? Understand your audience. So the kind of analogy I would give is like, we live in this little bubble as SEOs where we might talk to a digital marketing manager or director, or we might talk to a client, and then you have like your C level or your VP level or a private equity company or whatever. And in our bubble, we can talk super technical and we think it's great theory. If you give that same presentation that I'll give to you, Brian, that I'll give to whoever else, then we might say, like, that was a great deck. Like, send me the slides. I'm going to repurpose that. You pitch that same deck to a CEO or just a small business owner who they're a lawyer, a dentist, a plumber, and they're like, I have no idea what that sounds good. It doesn't matter to me. I don't know if you're doing anything for me, right? So delivering the message, repurposing that technical message into a digestible bite-sized pill is super, super important. Do you have any tips for anybody when it comes to driving value or making sure you have the right the right deck for the right audience?
Oh, 100%. So you just said a lot there. If you're listening to this and you're getting started in SEO, you're trying to improve, you need to rewind that and listen to it. Yeah, one of the questions I used to ask as I was improving in my presentation skills was, who am I talking to? I would always ask that before a presentation. And you're exactly right. You have to know who you're talking to, and you have to know how to express SEO in a lot of different ways and a lot of different languages. And if you don't do that, then you're going to lose the connection, you're going to lose the relationship, and probably ultimately the sale. And that is such a big part of SEO. There's so much talk about like optimizing this or setting this kind of strategy or this kind of technical setup that is ideal. But maybe there's less or not enough talk about how much relationship building is part of this. So yeah, knowing who you're talking to and what language is going to resonate with them, that is so important. Something I learned way too late was, early on, I used to talk about traffic and rankings, and it was all about that. But those can be inflated with really no tangible result for the business. So you really need to, as soon as you can in your career, start thinking about revenue. Someone I listen to a lot is Tom Critchlow, and he really helped like turn my ship around as far as mindset goes with his examples of inputs and outputs, and understanding SEO as a series of inputs that serve objectives, which ultimately serve that output that you're going for, which is normally revenue, because that's what's going to drive growth. So the sooner you can think in those terms, I think the sooner you're going to grow as an SEO.
I think that absolutely makes sense too, right? So if you think about yourself at like, an agency, you're like early in your career. Um, Actually, I guess it's irrelevant. No matter where you are in your career, you have a boss, right? Unless you're a freelancer, which we'll talk about. But if you're working in any sort of organization, you have a boss. And if you want to drive value, yes, it's to your client, or yes, it's to your brands, yes, it's to your websites. But your whole job is you got to make your boss look really good and real confident in you, because when it comes time to get promoted in the future, they're gonna go down the list of the people they manage and be like, who can I count on? Who can I trust to deliver that value? And regardless of how many number one keywords you have, how much traffic, if you can present it to them so that can relay the information to who their boss is, that's a clear path to success. Now you have to get the results, right? But I've personally experienced so many great SEOs who I knew were just amazing SEOs that they just never got promoted, because they didn't have that interpersonal skill of understanding who who they need to drive the value to the most, which is up the chain, up the chain, up the chain. Um, have you experienced anything similar in your career path?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been on a lot of calls, having been at 3 agencies. Yeah, and I've witnessed that exact thing. They don't understand kind of who they're talking to. A lot of times you're on the phone with, yeah, like someone who has to pass along what you're going to tell them. And it's kind of like a game of telephone. And so you have to understand that like whatever messaging you give on the call, it's almost like back in the days of cassette tapes when you like kept recording over them, you'd get like a generation of loss every time, and the audio quality would get worse the more you recorded over it. And it's kind of like that with messaging. So you have to obsess and be so on point with your messaging. It has to be clear, understandable, in the language of your point of contact, because it's going to have some generational loss, as you said, as it goes up the chain. So you need to really think about that and work on that skill and hone that skill. Talk to people who have done it. Do as much reading as you can about it, as much learning and research as you can. And then at a certain point, it's just about practice. Another thing I do love to do is, take something that's actually a great idea from what you're seeing as an SEO and apply it to a scenario like a deck. A lot of web pages, when they're exhaustively detailed and they're, 4,000 words long, they have a TLDR at the top that kind of gives you like the key bullet points. Do that in your decks. You as an SEO, you're constantly thinking about things that can make the user experience better. And that's what a deck is all about. It's about user experience. So the deck, the language you use, your presentation skills, all can come together to improve that UX. And that kind of helped me make some leaps and bounds when I thought about it that way.
Yeah, pro tip again, when you're presenting, information overload. Don't do it, right? 3 to 5 bullet points at most, really good visual, and then you're telling the story. The bullet points are for the people that didn't make the meeting, right? Like, I think on the opposite end, if you send your deck to whoever you need to send it to, and they come back and they're like, when I explained it to my boss, they didn't understand. That means your deck was not clear, right? Like, so whenever possible, if you're going to send a deck out to your boss, try to get a one-on-one with them real quick and just explain it to them. That powerful thing is leverage technology. We're in 2024. Shoot a quick 90-second video of an overview of the deck and how you would present it. If you were pressed for time, send it to them. They can watch it in 1 to 2 minutes, and then they have a good understanding of, okay, this is slide 7 is the most important slide. He spent way more time on this slide than the rest of the deck. So hammer those points home.
Wow, I love that. I've been doing that more with clients, actually. I've been sending recommendations, and especially when it's one where I really do want to get more context over to them, I just record a video and like do a screen share, walk them through it. And that's actually been working really well. One thing I really wanted to drill down on, though, is what you said about information overload. That's something as a teacher I used to think about all the time. And my lessons got more successful when I spent more time thinking, how can I get the same message across with less talking? And more like less talking and more action on the part of the student. And I got way better results that way. I used to have a lot of bad habits of like circling back to the same point because the first time I said it, I didn't feel like it hit home enough. So I'd come back to it and say it again. And by the end of it, oh my gosh, I had unleashed a 4,000 word blog post on like a bunch of third graders, and so that's something I brought to the agency life when I was in a position of speaking to clients and also training team members. I did the exact same thing. I made sure I was incredibly concise. I cut all the fat and just gave them the meat of what they needed. And if it was a training scenario, that was great because it allowed for much more time for actual physical participation on the part of the student. So I think that point about information overload, it's something that as you grow as an SEO, always be sensitive to that and always be thinking how you can improve in that arena because it really is effective.
Yeah, I think you hit on something I want to kind of flesh out a little bit more. Learning and training SEO, right? So information overload kind of works into that. But you told me earlier you started in 2013, and it was more penalty recovery stuff. So you came in like right after Penguin and Panda and Penguin, 2011, 2012. But I came around the same time, right? We didn't have access to a lot of these different things that are available today. SEO was never taught at any college or university, not even a single class. People didn't know what SEO was really back then. How did you learn what you learned, and what advice would you give your younger self if you had a time machine, you could go back, a decade?
Yeah. Wow, that's a great question. So learning, I mean, thinking back to it and comparing to what it could have been, it was chaotic. I don't know that I would change anything. I kind of loved the way that I learned SEO, but um, basically the way I learned it was okay. Number one, I just got thrown into the first role, and I had to be trained up quickly. Anyone who's worked at an agency probably can relate to that. So you're kind of like it's parallel. You're like thrown into the fire, but you're learning at the same time and as you go. Maybe that's where all this imposter syndrome comes from because you sort of have to fake it until you make it, especially at the beginning. So you learn that like I'm behind and I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I'm throwing all this out there. But yeah, it was like just get thrown into a role. I had a mentor at every agency I was at, and that's like critical. I did a ton of reading, a ton of YouTubing, and just following along with these recommendations I was throwing out there and how it impacted the client data. I mean, if I had to really wrap it up in a nutshell, that's kind of how it was. I would have liked it to be a lot more formal. I wish to address another part of your question that I think you asked as I ramble. I really wish that I started earlier with creating a website, owning my own thing and doing my own SEO experiments early on. I wish I'd started that way earlier. And in fact, when I became like in a more of a manager role at another agency, that's something I did with my team. I bought us a website, and we were experimenting with AI content and SEO initiatives and internal linking, different practices and all that kind of thing because we needed a playground and a sandbox to experiment and learn those lessons. That just gives you so much confidence and so much real world know-how. Of course, it's not like a huge site that's super authoritative or anything like that, but um, that's like one thing I can throw out there that I wish I did earlier. I wish that was kind of like my first step, and then I started to learn how agencies did things and work on different websites, different clients, different niches, that kind of thing. It would have been nice to expand out from there, but yeah. How about you, Shane? Like, how did you get your start? I'm always interested to hear.
Yeah, I think one thing that made me kind of chuckle was you mentioned YouTube, and I think everyone listening to this today is like, well, of course YouTube, like duh. But 10 years ago, YouTube was not an educational platform. There was a couple of like old school SEOs that had couple of videos out there.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically Moz. Moz was basically the truth, right? And we did
Yeah.
a lot of information research there. So everybody listening today, coming from two boomers, quote unquote, YouTube was not like it is today. There was not just thousands and thousands of videos on how to do keyword research or what hreflang
Mm-hmm.
was or canonicals or the top 7 best technical SEO tools of 2020. Those were not a thing. And then,
100%. At my second role, week one, well, day one, I was sat down at a table in this little miniature lounge, and the art of SEO was just slammed on the desk in front of me, like dust flying everywhere, like the never ending story. And I was just told to read that. And I was like, are you kidding me? The thing's like that thick. And he's like, yeah, that's pretty much it. You're going to work and you're going to read that book for the first week.
yeah, it was a lot. Paper books used to be a thing, people. Believe it or not,
Yeah, there
paper
you
books
go.
used to be a thing. There used to be different editions. No, I remember, Bruce Clay's book, Search Engine Optimization for Dummies, was like my equivalent of that. I think Bruce is on like his like 8th or 9th edition at this point. But his website was also good too. His blog's always been good. I think website siloing is kind of like how I started SEO early on. So I was at an agency. They printed it out. It was like 30 pages long or something. And like this is kind of like what we're gonna do to win, and that's really stuck with me to this day. A lot of things have changed since we came to the industry in 2012, 2013 era. But one thing that hasn't is site architecture. And I think the best way to do it is exactly what you said. Create your own website. I remember my first website was a food review website. I would just go to my local, and I was
Cool.
young. I wanted free food. And I'm kind of a foodie, so I made a website, and I was just like, hey, if you give me a free like meal, I'll shoot a video, a couple photos, and put a review. And back then, you could actually link from your Yelp comments to a website, so you could actually put a hyperlink in there. It's not the case anymore,
Wow.
but like that was like, that was my that was my link building for my website. So yeah, the more you can tinker, the better. I personally like to hire people that list their own website on their resumes, just because I can take a look to see how their brain kind of works. And even if it's not fully done up, like it shows like, okay, so at least, when I crawl the site, all of the titles are unique. The pages have good content. It doesn't look like it's AI, or maybe it is, but at least we have some sort of insights there. I also like hiring entrepreneurs, people that have owned their own business or freelance or consulted in the past, just because they have a little more accountability. Accountability is such an important thing to developing a good team, a good culture, and just a winning program.
100%. Yeah, and that's yet another reason why, if you're listening to this and you're like newer in your SEO career, or maybe if you're not and you just want to improve and you haven't done this yet, yeah, start your own website, because another thing it does is it helps you empathize more with the client. And Shane, this is something I wanted to talk to you about. And I don't want to scare clients away from agencies or anything, but I think there is a tendency, like when the client doesn't understand something, like you said earlier, that you think a deck is a banger, and then they get it and they're just like, I don't relate to it and I don't want to move forward with the plan. Or if they're like constantly on you about like a Google Search Console notification or about a keyword that moved from one day to the next, I really think at agency there is a tendency to kind of like badmouth them a little bit, or roll your eyes and be like, yeah, there the client goes again with their, whatever. Um, and I would advise you, as soon as you can, to get away with that, like, or get away from that. Don't get pulled into that. Even though it's funny and kind of like the water cooler talk, and to laugh about that and jaw about it, I wouldn't get pulled into that, because when you own a site, you'll understand why they're doing that. That's their business, it's their livelihood, it's their thing that they're trying to build, grow, improve on. They're up against competitors, and who knows what else they're up against. It's tough and it's stressful, and of course they care about it. And when you own a site, you'll care too. That really helped me empathize with clients. And sometimes I don't even do monthly reporting for clients. I check in every week or every 3 days. I don't even have a set cadence, because who cares about a set cadence? We're working on something. When we feel like checking in on it, just check in on with them. I do that for clients, and actually they really like that. It keeps them in touch with what's going on. There's never any surprises, good or bad. And yeah, it's like I just like that so much better than just setting some arbitrary timeline to check in on all the data. Here are all your surprises for the month, that I have to now navigate with you through a conversation. When I partner up with a client or even work with them at an agency, I see that website as my own, and I kind of act like that. So when there's something cool to report or something that's a little troublesome that we should look into more, I just send them a screenshot and I talk to them about it. And I feel like that's way better for the relationship, and it's much more empathetic.
Yeah, great point. Out of sight, out of mind, right?
100%.
And the number one killer to SEO success is a lack of implementation. So if you have that steady communication with them, you're always on top of their mind. Oh, I owe Brian that content approval. Oh, I need to give him this access. Oh, he is asking me about he needs a bio for my author page, because apparently, authors are a big piece of Google's EAT algorithm now, or EAT right now, right? So, if you are at an agency and you have a client and you expect that, one call a month where you just do a 10-page deck and you give them, here's what we did, here's what we need approval upon, and you're not going to meet with them for the next month, you're gonna quickly find yourself 2-3 months behind of like, also now your performance isn't there. They're like, what happened here? Why are our rankings dropping? Why is our traffic dropping? Why are our sales down? Our phones aren't ringing. You used to bring in 70% of our leads. This month it's 35%. What happened? Then you're just like on your back foot all of a sudden. Well, we gave you all this content and you never approved it. It's like, no, that's not the client's fault, right? Is that the client's fault, or is that your fault for not following up, not having a more consistent thing? And that's so easy to have. It happens all the time at agencies, because you're in your career, you have more and more accounts piling up, and it's easy to be like, okay, well, it's not my fault. I sent them the deck. I gave them the content. That's on them now. But at the end of the day, agencies work off of recurring revenue, right? So if you
Mm-hmm.
start losing those accounts, is it really the client's fault or is it your fault, right? It's perception becomes reality. to that. So if you're listening and you want some advice on how to get to the next level, to retain a level that someone like a Brian's at, you got to be accountable to yourself, drive that value, and communication is trumps all else. Perception becomes reality. If they're talking to you all the time, even if you're just talking about something very simple, to your point, they have a search console error, you might not think as an SEO that's the most high priority item, but to them it is. And how do you drive value? You answer their questions and you fix the things that they care about the most. One story I always give is, it's one of the only accounts I've ever lost in my life. I balled out on this account. It was it was a great case study. I actually used the case study to get promoted, and then they left. But basically, we took them on. They found us because we were servicing one of their competitors. We were crushing for a competitor. That competitor left, and we signed them, crushed it for them too. Number one keywords through the roof, great traffic. They had to hire 2 more technicians because they had so many leads. I was like, not only am I going to retain this account, I'm going to ask for twice the retainer in the next coming contract, because why wouldn't they want to spend more? And not only that, we're going to get their paid search. We're going to get all these different channels. This was before LSA was even a thing. Lost the account. I was like, what? It was I wish I could have seen the look on my own face. The reason we lost is because that competitor was like, I don't remember exactly, like a ex-family member or something, and they wanted to outrank them for their own brand term, which is impossible. They didn't make that clear throughout the 12-month contract, probably 3 dozen calls. They were loving the leads, all that. Lost the account because of it. So it's a hyperbolic example. It's a true story. It's hyperbolic. But, one thing that you should be asking every client when you onboard them is, what does success look like to you in 6 months, in 12 months, 18 months from now? Have them define it. And if they don't know the answer, give them some options. But you got to flush that stuff out early, because you could be working towards the most ultimate SEO geek out campaign. You think you're just crushing it, and then it is not what the client wanted. They only wanted this one thing, this one term. Nothing else mattered to them. And you get clients like that.
100%. 100. That is so important. And that's another, like, if you're listening to this podcast, and you're looking to grow, these are the kinds of things that can fast forward you way beyond other folks that are doing the same thing. Because that light bulb, when that goes off, when you realize, I think about different things and I just have a different kind of mindset than my client, and we need to bridge that gap. I need to get on their page and they need to get on my page, and we need to find kind of common ground. And yeah, you're there to help them, and sometimes they're going to get in their own way. And yeah, those discovery questions are critical. And it's kind of like a podcast. Like, you need to set them up to tell you the things that you need to know, because they're not just going to tell you everything that you want to know, because sometimes they just don't know to tell you that. So yeah, that's a really critical thing.
Yeah, I think it kind of comes back down to, I posted on LinkedIn earlier this week and you replied to it, but the question was fact or fiction. Client retention starts before the first dollar is spent. What is your take on that?
I absolutely think retention starts at first communication, period. And that's your first date. That's your first impression that you get to make. And in every communication with a client, if you can be, knowledgeable about their site and their issues, if you can be curious to discover the things that you're not knowledgeable about, if you can be personal, and if you can set yourself apart from what every other agency is doing from the outset, you're going to be successful. And another thing that I really like to do with clients, again, right from the beginning, is what I did for my career. I like to teach them. I like to teach them about SEO and how it can be meaningful for their site, and how it can connect to growth for whatever thing that they're trying to grow. If you teach them and you get them on the same page with you, and you make that a through line in the relationship, it's going to help you through bad times, like when data's down. You've sort of mentored them. You've taught them about SEO. You've been touching in with them about their data constantly, so there's no surprises, and they just know that you have their back. So yeah, I try to do that from the beginning. I never cared whether they were like a client or not. If they're a prospect and they need help, I'm going to hop in and I'm going to kick up that relationship right away so that they see us as invaluable partners. And if they ever did cancel in the future, they're going to miss us because every other agency is doing X, Y, and Z, and we're doing it completely differently, and it's better. It's more engaged.
Yeah, I subscribe to a similar thought. I think it's totally fact. And first, communication is a great way to put it, but just managing expectations is so important. When it comes to SEO, although there's so many great tools out there, and there's definitely clear tactics that generally work, you're really buying into a theory, right? SEO is 100% hypothetical. As much as we don't want to admit that sometimes, it is. So I think it's super important to, when you're pitching a prospect, or you're onboarding a client, maybe you take over for someone else, you get them to buy into your methodology or your theory of SEO, right? And I think if you have that and you can explain, like, this is not a sprint, it's going to take some time, right? But just because I say it's going to take 3 or 6 months to start seeing some progress doesn't mean we're not working those 3 to 6 months. Here's what you can expect from me, from us, from the team. And then you have to make sure you hit those milestones, right? So by the end of this week, you're going to get this. By the end of this month, you're going to get this. Then tying into that constant communication that you mentioned earlier, and that's the key to success, right? That's the winning recipe. Like I said, you still have to get the results, but the expectation starts from the beginning. And it's tough for a lot of SEOs that might be earlier in their career because you're just getting accounts assigned to you that some salesperson, brought on board. But it's really important that you have a conversation with your boss or that salesperson directly and be like, hey, man, I would love to come to the pitch call with you. Let me be the expert on the call, but I'll also help hold it accountable, right? We don't, a lot of agencies lose a lot of clients because they sign clients, at the end of the month, and they overpromise and they just set the team up for failure, right? So if the better the agency's culture is when it comes to setting it up for sustained success rather than just like a one shot, fill up the board, we need the revenue in, we don't care if they churn, the better your success is going to be at an agency. So yeah, there's definitely that's definitely a con of working at an agency, is just sometimes as an SEO you get put in unwinnable situations, or what can seem like unwinnable situations. But let's talk about some green flags. If you're earlier in your career, if you could go back into your time, you'd be like, what would be some things that you'd be looking for when you're interviewing at an agency? That it's like a two-way. It's interviews. People get these. It's a misconception, right? People think the agency has all of the power. Whoever's hiring has all the power. I'm kind of at their mercy. I just need this job. I need a job, and they're kind of willing to accept whatever's given to them. But as you get, or especially when you get later in your career, you can you should have some standards that you hold yourself accountable to and stuff that you're looking for. What are some of those things that you'd be looking for, both early on in your career or even in the present day?
Yeah, if I was an SEO shopping around for an agency to work at, yeah, for me, I definitely am like a people person, and I look for people that will be, great colleagues. So I look for, signals of a highly collaborative environment, open to teaching, group thinking, knowledge sharing, that kind of thing, and just like great people, open, honest. Um, I'm trying to think of the word for, it's a safe environment. You can speak up when you don't know something, because that's something as a younger SEO I was actually always afraid to do. Everything I didn't know in my mind became you should know this. So keep your mouth shut, learn it, and then join the conversation later. And I don't like that kind of environment. That's the opposite of the environment that I tried to foster when I became a manager. So I definitely look for that kind of thing. When I was looking around, I did not care anything about perks. I don't care if you have a ping pong table, an Xbox, and I'm going to be able to eat 5 Nature Valley bars a day. I literally do not care.
Granola, though, it's the best flavor.
let's have a conversation. If it's peanut butter, no. Um, yeah, like I don't care about any of that. I learned very quickly that that is all nonsense. It does not matter. You're going to spend almost all of your time, or you should be, working, and you're going to be working with people. So those two things became the most important things to me. I have to love the work, and I've got to love working with the people. Otherwise, I'm going to burn out, and I'm going to start looking for something else, probably. So those are two things. I mean, they can be a little difficult to feel out, but a lot of the interview processes, they started to become like 4-stage, 5-stage. All these multi-stage interviews actually, they were exhausting, but they were helpful to really nail down like whether those two things were going to work out. So yeah, simple answer, but that's really what I used to look for, what I focus on. And I'd advise maybe for someone else, I can't imagine those two things wouldn't be important to you. So just kind of pointing that out, and don't be lured in by like perks and
Bells
things
and
like
whistles.
that. Yeah, bells and whistles, and what you can look out the window and see and all that kind of stuff. I mean, a beautiful office with all that stuff is it's just all decoration. It's not going to matter. You're not going to spend a lot of time in the kitchen, and you're not going to spend a lot of time playing ping pong. You're going to be thinking about that client call that's coming up. So you won't even enjoy the game.
100%. I think that's spot on. You need a safe place to work and to develop and to grow, right? And alongside that, it comes down to expectations too, right? You should be asking yourself, you should be playing offense on these interviews too, right? So if you're brand new to SEO, this is your first SEO job, what is your growth path for me? What can I expect in the first 90 days of this journey? When do you expect me to start taking on accounts, or is this not, well, I did not be taking on accounts in this role? How's the team structure set up? Is there someone else like me that's in this role that's been promoted out of it? Like, is this, what kind of long-term goals do they have for you and your growth path? What expectations do you have of me right now? What do you expect me to know coming into this job? I like to ask culture questions too. Culture is super hard to find. Like, some people, like you said, it's a ping pong table, it's a nice kitchen, it's free lunch every day or whatever it might be. But I'm more about the data-driven decisions, right? So it's kind of like, well, what is your churn rate? Like, what's your employee attention rate? How many people have you lost in this department in the last year?
Nice. Sounds like an audit, forensic audit.
Kind of, yeah, basically,
No, you're right,
like,
though.
it speaks a lot, right? There's going to be higher turnover in agencies. That's just the nature of the beast. People want to get paid for what they're worth, and they absolutely should. And sometimes they get overlooked for promotion, or it came down to them and someone else, and they're like, hey, I can go make some more money elsewhere. It happens at agencies.
Yep.
I think the best agencies retain really well, but, at a certain point, it's going to happen. But there's also extremes, right? You're like, well, this is a 6-person team. You just told me that on the interview, and you just said you've lost 3 people in the last 12 months. 50% seems really high. So do some digging there. Once you get more connected to the industry, it's nice with LinkedIn, right? You can go, who's the director of the SEO team, or the VP, or whoever, the CEO, find some mutual connections, and just reach out to them like, hey, do you know this person? Like, what are they like? So do your own homework. Don't be super eager just to take the first job that comes your way if your intuition is telling you like something's off about this, right? Like, you
I love that.
You do what you got to do, but be smart about it.
Yeah, I love that. All of that. Those questions were excellent, by the way. Rattling those off the top of your head. Yeah, those are all like excellent questions. And that's another thing to think about too. The size, if you are looking at agency, the size of the agency is actually probably going to make a pretty big impact on the overall experience. If you like small and scrappy, just know that, like you said at the beginning, you might have to wear a lot of hats, and you might have to like improvise a lot and hop in on things that you didn't expect to have to do. Like, but it also can be fun because you're a small group, and you're like, maybe the camaraderie is a little bit better. And then a bigger agency is just, it's going to be a bigger experience. You're going to be one of many, and maybe you're siloed in a specific team. The work might even be more like hyper focused rather than the breadth that you might get at a small scrappy place. So yeah, just that's another thing to think about. They're not all the same. All the experiences can be quite different.
Absolutely. And, again, it's about being prepared, and you need to go in, if you're interviewing somewhere, what are your own goals for this place or the place that you're going to choose to work at, right? So if your goal is like, I want to retire at this place, right? Like, well, number one, good luck. It's rare, but good luck. That'd be cool, you know?
Yeah.
But number two, it's like my goal is just to get my foot in the door. I just want to learn SEO, right? So ask those kind of questions. Like, tell them, like, hey, I'm fresh. I learned about it from my friend, college, university. I was reading some articles, watched some videos. I think this is a career that like I really want to be in, but I need to learn it. I need a place that's going to let me learn and grow, and then I'm going to become a rock star for you, right? Those are some kind of questions you could be rephrasing along the way versus we know you're new, but we just have some cheap accounts. We're going to throw you on them and you're going to learn trial by fire. Maybe that works for you, maybe it doesn't, right? Those are the kind of questions you need to have internally with yourself and think about and marinate on. But there's just, my biggest pet peeve is like when people get a bad taste of the SEO world because they had a bad first experience at their first job or a bad first client or whatever, and then vice versa. There's nothing worse when it's both of those things combined. It's someone's first SEO job. They have little experience, and this is the first time that this small business owner has invested in SEO, right?
Yeah.
It's
Oh
like
gosh.
6 months from now, you have two people that just made SEO. SEO does not work. I tried it. Blah blah
Yeah.
blah. Right?
Absolutely. I know. As you were saying that, I was thinking that comes up on the client side too. They've had work done by a couple of terrible places or whatever, and then they've made a determination about the thing as a whole, and you get sad about that. Shane, can I comment on something? Because you said something, and yeah, I really relate to this, and this goes back to like how my career was able to grow up to a VP level. It can be okay to work at an agency for not forever and for a like maybe even a predetermined purpose. So one agency that I worked at, I knew it was going to be technical SEO and I knew it was going to be focused on e-commerce. And actually, that's what I didn't get a lot of exposure to at my first agency. So I thought to myself, well, I've got backlink removal experience and I kind of understand a little bit about the algorithm, I guess. So let me learn a bit about the technical side of things because that had started to interest me. I had started to read a little bit about that. I went to that agency and I wasn't a huge fan of how they ran things there. And so like it just didn't fit with my work style. So I basically just considered it boot camp. Like I'm going to stay here for maybe up to a year. I'm going to extract every lesson I possibly can, but I've got my eye on this next step. And this next agency was all encompassing. You would basically do everything. You do technical SEO, keyword research, content. I'd get exposure to everything. And for me, it just told the whole story of developing my skill set. I start small and segmented. I learn a new aspect of SEO, and then I go to a place where it's all encompassing and I basically have to master everything. It just told the perfect story. And that's what I ended up doing. And it was really beneficial. So I just wanted to kind of lean into your comments on that. That can actually be a cool way to do it.
Absolutely, right? I mean, I think time is our most precious commodity, right? So invest your time wisely, and yeah, thanks for that. I think that hits on so many levels. But speaking about career paths, you reached basically the pinnacle of SEO. VP of SEO is basically as high as it gets. I think there's another separate conversation to have where I think a prediction for the future is in the next 10 years, we're going to start seeing a lot more CEOs that have an SEO background than ever before. But that leads us to the current day where a lot of the best SEOs in the industry, they don't choose to go down that path of trying to get to that C-level suite because there's so much money to be had for really good SEOs like yourself in the freelance world. So you've recently made that transition from, an organization to freelance. Walk me through kind of like, was this always a goal for you? Did it just kind of like, did something just click for you? What kind of decision what's the thought process to make a swap like that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel fortunate that I was able to transition. And yeah, it's something I'd always wanted to do because as I've been talking about, I really only had agency experience. So it was something I wanted to try. In-house is also something I'd love to do more of. I don't know if I'll be able to do that. You only live one life, but yeah. And so I felt fortunate that I had the skill set. I was stable enough to make the leap and try it out. And it's been different in a lot of ways, and it's kind of been similar in some. And I guess that's because I took a lot of the best ideas, processes, documentation that I learned and even generated myself through my agency career, and I just applied it to freelance. So it wasn't as bumpy as I thought it would be. I already knew how to like interact with clients. I knew how to set strategy. I knew how to send recommendations and that serve like a long-term
Right.
plan. And I've already had my reporting style down. So doing it like later in my career like this made the transition a lot less bumpy. Um, and yeah, it's been really interesting, and I grew a lot in the 6 or 7 month period that I first started to do it. Yeah, I grew a lot. I wish I could explain everything that was behind that, but it was a lot of new things to research, new tools to try out, new tactics I've always wanted to try out, and brand new clients of all different kinds. One like wrinkle I added to my client portfolio was YouTube creators. When you're a freelancer, you got to be creative in finding your first few clients. It's like super scary. And so one thing I did was I found YouTubers that I really liked that had pretty mature channels with a lot of subscribers, like around the 500,000 mark. Because I thought that was kind of like the sweet spot. I would check their website, and more times than not, it was junk. And so what I would do is I'd reach out to them and I'd say, I've been watching your content for years. Here's a video I connected with. In fact, one email I tried to be real grabby, and I basically sent this email and said, like, you're the reason I got engaged. And because one of their videos was like one of the reasons, like when my fiance and I were dating early on, I sent her that video. And so I sent that email and said, yeah, I've been watching your content for a while, and I checked out your website. I'm a professional SEO, and your website has so much growth potential that you're currently not tapping into. I think this could be an asset for you to, expand your growth and diversify and everything. And they got back to me and became a client through that.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, so it's like those kind of things like that you're not doing at an age. That's what spawned like all this growth. It's been I could list 20, 30 examples of just crazy life stuff that happened as a freelancer that helped me build it and also grow as an SEO.
Well, number one, congrats on the yes. Um, you said you got engaged, so good for you, man. Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that. And then congrats on the client too. That's awesome. So
Thanks.
I love that. I think I posted about this on LinkedIn not that long ago too. But if you want to have a lasting career in SEO, you got to become more of a strategist, which requires thinking outside the box. So you're freelancing. You have to source your own clients at this point. So thinking outside the box like that is just amazingly creative. Kudos to you. I think that I've never heard of a strategy like that before. So I think that's awesome. But when it comes down to strategy, like you're a director of VP, and that's what really separates you from the best from the rest, right? It's not just being able to do the screaming frog report and then, being like a robot where it's like, okay, so title tags need to fix, meta description need to fix, conicals, they need to self rep, going down the list. That's, in my opinion, like what AI is going to be able to replace. They're going to be able to crawl a site, make a WordPress plugin, and then they're going to be able to check off those things. But what I think is never going away is true SEO strategy. So people like yourself that are able to take those different elements, communicate with the client, explaining what the strategy is and why it's important, and then also explaining, just here's stuff that AI just still doesn't do well, right? Here's a couple things that are just never going to get replaced by an AI tool because of things like EEAT, right? So yeah, I guess just hats off to you. What do you think the future holds, the dichotomy between AI and SEO in the next, year or two?
Yeah, wow, that's a big one. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's probably going to replace some of the tactical things, like more straightforward tactical things, if we can trust it. Because I will say, I mean, it's not like I don't believe it's going to improve or anything like that, but I really don't trust it for much right now. I use it very, very carefully, and
Same.
it's funny because, not to meander off topic, but sometimes I would find myself I actually started timing myself using AI or just doing the task how I normally did it. And sometimes like the AI use, I was happy with the output, but gosh, I had to spend almost twice the time because it's like trust and verify is like constant. It's almost like I'm using it. And I'm like, I've been hurt before. I have to question you.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's kind of crazy. So if that improves and it actually can pull things off on the SEO tactical side with regularity, consistency, accuracy, yeah, I think so. But like you said, on the strategy side, gosh, that is so nuanced, and there's so many different directions you could go with that. I don't think it's quite going to cover that. Not in the foreseeable future. Even though yeah, not in the foreseeable future. So yeah, as an SEO, staying ahead of just that remedial stuff that everyone else is kind of learning and stuck on, and thinking higher level, thinking about strategy, tactics, thinking outside of the box, observing what competitors are doing, and asking like, well, but how can we differentiate and get a little creative and maybe take a few risks, whatever it is, like on social platforms or with our YouTube videos or something like that, and working on your client communication and relationships and helping them build like teams and systems internally that actually get the SEO work done that serves the goals they want to accomplish. Because a lot of times they're they want to hear what they need to do, but then they don't actually do it. And then a gigantic backlog is created and they're going to cancel, whether they love you or not, they're just going to cancel if it's not impacting the bottom line. So like, if you can stay ahead and you can stay in that zone, I feel like you're probably going to stay ahead of where AI is going to get, and you're going to like future proof yourself. You'll be much safer. And if you're in that zone of learning, like if that's all you do at this time, like you audit canonicals or you look at a screaming frog crawl or something like that, I would probably recommend like embracing AI and becoming, someone who's very adept at using it and can apply it in ways that get like accurate output and helps you be an efficient worker. Maybe like a few years ago, if someone could optimize a web page in an hour, that was great. They could do like eight pages a day. That's fantastic. Maybe now you need to be able to do 24 pages a day or something like that, because you can use AI as a tool to amplify your output. Maybe that's a way that you won't fall behind or be replaced or found as redundant.
Yeah, I think such a big part of it is people fall too in love with metrics that are vanity a little bit. So what I mean by that is like you crawl your site on any random tool and it'll be like, oh, you scored a 71%, or like, I love Yoast SEO. Don't get me wrong, I use it on a lot of WordPress sites, but I'll be like, oh no, you hear clients all the time like, oh no, it's red. Yoast says it's red.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to rank well. And it's like, well, you have the free version and it's one keyword and we're using variations or whatever. Don't fall in love with some of these scoring systems out there, because number one, you don't know how they're weighting it. Number two, most of them aren't all inclusive of a website. And number two, just because a site is green doesn't mean it's going to rank or perform or drive traffic or leads or sales. It just doesn't. It takes a human element to rely on the experience that they've had to research the competitors manually through the SERPs. At the end of the day, SEO is not rocket science. We can leverage tools, whether it's AI or not, to reverse engineer basically any website there ever was on the internet and figure out how they got to the top 3 positions. And then it's your job to try to outperform what you're seeing and marrying those 3 things. So my advice would just be, don't be afraid of AI. AI is here to stay. It's going to improve over time, but you'll always have a job in the industry if you know how to leverage them, which again takes you becoming a strategist and not like, an NPC, right? As a video game term. You need to have main character energy, right? Less NPCs. You're not giving the quests, you're completing the quest, right?
Yeah, don't be an ad,
Yeah, that's exactly it. Cool, Brian. I know you're freelancing now. How can people get a hold of you? They want to work with you.
Oh, I think probably they can find me on LinkedIn, Brian Gorman H. I put the H in there, my middle initial, to differentiate. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and my website is briangormanh.com. Let's not mess up the website. If you want to, reach me through a contact form or something like that, that goes straight to my email.
Awesome. And what's kind of like, who's like an ideal client that you've seen a lot of success with?
Yeah, like I said, someone who has a website or even a YouTube channel. Honestly, I've been doing a lot more YouTube lately because huge audience, and I'm a creator on there with some channels that definitely need some love. But yeah, I've just been working with more clients and having successful initiatives there. So YouTube is fine, but obviously, if you have a website that is underperforming and you're you could be an e-commerce site, you could be a local business, you could be an individual. Really, I got so much experience at agency working with a lot of different websites that there's very few that give me trouble. So I could probably help you on the consulting front, no matter what type of business you are.
Yeah, I would personally recommend Brian to anybody out there that would like to even just learn, just learn a little bit more about their own website. Right? He's a wealth of knowledge, but I have no doubt that he can open your eyes in many ways if you give him a chance to review your site or your YouTube channel in this case. So Brian, thank you so much for the time. It's been an hour. It went by super fast. I was thinking we probably have 20 more minutes, ask a few more questions, but maybe we can save it for a part two. Another thing that Brian and I were talking about is if we have anybody out there that would like a Q&A, maybe you're early in your career, you're trying to get that first job, or you want help interviewing or landing that first job, maybe we can do some sort of like Q&A sort of an episode. So if you guys want to see that, let me know. But Brian, appreciate the time. Any last words?
No, Shane, that Q&A sounds great. That'd be really cool. Like, get some coaching from two SEOs that built careers. We'll see where we can help you out. And yeah, I had a great time chatting today, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.